Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Just want to let you know I just finished the book, Pharmacy School Rankings for Residency, Solving the Applications Puzzle for Future Pharmacists. I wanted to go through it with you and kind of talk a little bit about how pharmacy school rankings matter in residency. And it's amazingly hard to find them. And they're not usually set up in this way, so I want to kind of go over how I set it up in the book, and then the 20 chapters that I have in there. So let's start with, the prologue. I just kind of talk about the big 5 questions, and you can see these in there. But the big thing is figuring out like what percentage of students get a residency interview from your college, what percentage of those students that get an interview get the residency. What are the odds a student from your school will get the residency at a particular site? And that depends on 2 things. Where are the current residents from geographically, and where did the current residents go to pharmacy school? And really more, how well did that pharmacy school do? 4 is how many residency applications should you send? And 5, what are the best places for you to apply? So those 5 things you can go look for free on there. But what I want to go through is kind of what I was trying to get a hold of and kind of trying to do with each of these different ways of talking about the rankings. So let's look at chapter 1 first. And these are the interview rate percentages. So what I did as an interview rate is there's 3 kind of steps. And the first step is getting an interview. And in the rankings, it actually says registered for the match. And then active with the match is someone that actually ranked. So when you talk about how many people made it from one to the other, you have to get an interview to rank. Like you can't rank a school that didn't, or a residency that didn't interview you will not be ranking you, so there's no reason to rank them. But the top 4 schools actually got 100%. That is, every single applicant got a residency interview. And that provides some layer of comfort, but these tend to be smaller because the smaller the school, the more likely you're going to have that you have this really small group of people that are going to qualify. So AUHS in, I think it's Signal Hill in California, Husan, I think is how you pronounce it, Cedarville, University of Puerto Rico. And then UCSF, which is very familiar, came in number 5 at 97%, Thomas Jefferson at 97%, University of Findlay, 96%, Wayne State, 94%, UNC, 94%, Iowa, 94%, Rhode Island, 94%, Northeast, which is Neomed, 94%, Drake, 93%, Binghamton, 93%, and Connecticut, 93%. So it's just kind of nice to know. The very first thing is, well, if I apply to residency in the first place and I go to some school, what are the chances I'm going to get an interview? Like, is it even worth my time? And, when you're looking at this group in the top 15, it's going to be over, 93%. And I hate to use grades like it's an A, but obviously I would feel very comfortable when I see that there's over a 9 out of 10 chance that I'm going to get that interview. But that was just kind of one of the first things that I looked at. And then I kind of went into the next piece, which is chapter 2, which is the match rate. So the match rate, I first kind of looked at 3-year schools to see, is there a difference between 3-year schools and 4-year schools in the match rate? And it's significant if you take them as a whole. But you don't go to 22 3-year schools, and there's now 24 if you count some satellites and so forth. You go to one school. So where does your school match? And there are 2 schools that are relatively new that have amazing match rates in the 3-year school space. And I just, how can you be a school that just came into existence and you are doing better than all these other schools? I would really love to talk to those people. And one of the schools I did get to meet a bunch of their students, and I got to interview them the last time SHP was in Vegas. And they were really, really, really nice people. And it just, you could just kind of tell. I wish you could say you could really get it, but I don't know. I would like to work with them, is what I'm saying. So on the side of, I have no idea what their grades were, how qualified they were. I just know that they were someone that I could see, I would love to work with them for a year or something like that. Then what about distance and online programs? So now we're up to 7 online programs. Unfortunately, the data isn't separated. So we don't know, did the online students do better? Did the in-person do better? How did they do relative to each other? And that would be much more valuable to separate that information. And then the national match rate rankings. So I put them in 15s because what it does is with 148 pharmacy schools basically reporting or their satellites and so forth. And it's a little weird that some schools have their satellites reporting and others don't break it up that way, even though I know they have satellites. So I'm not clear on why that is. But what you can do is quickly figure out okay, well, in the interview rate, I'm group 1, 2, and sometimes there's ties. So just count yourself in the group above. So if there's a tie between the top one in group 2 and the bottom one in group 1, you're still probably group 1. That's where I would put you. So when we look at next is, okay, well, so maybe your school is a number 2 with interview rate, number 3 with match rate, and then a number 1, well, you would maybe a number 2 with persistence rate. And so that's what chapter 3 is about. I thought it was more important to take all of the pieces. Okay, how well did somebody interview? How well did somebody match? And then when you take that person that started the process as registered, when you use that as the denominator instead of, that active with list, you get to really see a different group of schools. Okay. Next thing, do NABPLEX pass rates matter? I think there's going to be a huge backlash this year against certain schools, and we're not going to know who they are until May. And I'm going to kind of expound on that. So the acceptance rate to residency, if you look at the match rate, went up to 77 from around 67, so about 10%. So that means a lot more students got residencies. But that also means that when you see the NABPLEX decline, which it did by another 2%, that means that RPDs are now dealing with probably more NABPLEX failures and more Mpje failures and Cpje, I would assume too, than they've ever had to deal with before. And if all of a sudden an RPD gets 2 failures from the same school, or maybe they're buddies with somebody at the hospital system down the road, and they're like, yeah, I got somebody from that school too, and they failed the NABPLEX too. So I think that is going to be a delayed blowback where they're going to look at somebody twice, and you're really going to want to kind of know where the NABPLEX pass rate is, because you want to show them that, no, I did not wait till the last month. I did not wait till residency to study for the NABPLEX. I actually did RX prep. I did 4 or 5 RX prep chapters every single API. And so I'm actually 3/4 of the way studied by the time I got to April. That would bring, or I will be, 3/4 of the way studied by the time I get to April or May. And that will warm a residency program director's heart. When you show and I feel like what's going to happen is from those NABPLEX failures, all of a sudden they're going to start asking questions in the interview that are very NABPLEX-like. And they're like, all right, well, I can do my own assessment. I can see if you're going to pass the NABPLEX or not. Okay, you had an API in this topic. Let's ask some NABPLEX questions from that chapter. And then just kind of turn them around a little bit. But that's what I would do if I'm an RPD, because I am not going to get burnt twice, because it's on me. If one resident maybe doesn't pass the NABPLEX or Mpje out of 6 or 8, okay, that happens. But if multiple residents are failing and multiple residents are getting dismissed, that's on the RPD for not having put some kind of way or mechanism to assess during the interview, is this person going to pass the NABPLEX? Is that likely? I did put the Mpje and Cpje pass rates in here just for some context to remind you that, first of all, Mpje pass rates are only 80%, and Cpje pass rates are in the 50s. So when you are applying as a Californian to a California residency, you want to be very clear of how hard you've been studying for the Cpje. Mpje is no joke either. I mean, I honestly, if I worked for the VA, I would absolutely get my Idaho license first because I wouldn't have to pass the Mpje, put 100% of my effort into the NAPLEX, and move from there. And now with Idaho State offering in-state tuition to out-of-staters for the first year, and then they've got some mechanism of allowing you to become an in-stater, it's even better. But with Mpje and Cpje, I would make sure that I am very clear to the RPD, hey, I know you didn't bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up. I've been studying for the NAPLEX since May of last year. I have been using the NAPLEX RX Prep or whatever to do this, and I am not someone who is going to wait till residency when it's super busy to try to pass the NAPLEX. You can count on me. And the other thing that does is it shows that you empathize with their situation because it's going to be bad. And I'm telling you, like, they are not happy right now as they're finding and dismissing residents or having to dismiss residents because they're, you go right to the residency manual. If you're not, you didn't pass in 4 months and you started July 1, so we're talking about July, August, September, and then October. That's it. You can't do it. Again, please do integrate the NAPLEX into your APPEs. Do make a plan with your preceptors. Just studying 4 or 5 chapters, thin chapters from RX Prep, makes a huge difference. Number 7, I did separate private and public colleges with all of these later on because it is so huge for somebody that is going to a private school relative to a public school. It's just a big difference, and you can't really compare them apples to apples a lot of times. So if you're going to a private college, you can kind of see where you rank among private colleges, and public college, you can see among public colleges, because there is about a 12% or 13% difference between private and public colleges if you look at them as a group. But you don't go to a group of colleges. You go to a single college. And you just want to see where is yours relative to the privates. And then, of course, you can always look, relative to the publics as well. And then the median of both, I mentioned at the beginning of the chapter. And then I go through the match rates and persistence rates with private versus public as well. Then I talk about U.S. News and World Report. And they have their own super algorithm for figuring things out. But I feel like their last time they did pharmacy schools was 2020. And a lot has changed since then. And the schools that are ranked should rank really high are not even on there. But I'm just letting you know that when you look at private schools on U.S. News and World Report, it really does not reflect the ability of a school to get a residency. The number 1 ranking school in the country, University of Findlay, is a private school that ranks number 108 on U.S. News. How is that possible? The school that sends the most students, University of Florida, is also, kind of a number 1, but they rank number 5 with U.S. News. So again, the U.S. News and World Report is very favorable to big schools. And if you're at a private school, you can't really use that for residency. You might be able to use it for other stuff, but not for residency. I do mention some stuff about pharmacy school applicants and kind of talking about the rankings list and how I talk about pass rate trends, that if you are looking at pharmacy school, and most of you are already in pharmacy school or out of it, but that there are pass rate trends that we can look at, and confirmation bias. So if you see, low, high, you're like, oh, well, it'll probably be high next semester. And that's kind of a confirmation bias. And then a little bit more about the law exams and how underrepresented the private colleges are when it comes to the rankings. I talk a little bit more on match rankings and really try to explain persistence rate, which is my favorite way to rank a school. That is from those students that started and registered to those that matched. what is that ratio, much more than the match rate, which is really more, okay, you interviewed against other people, how did you do? Then I talk a little bit about finances, which we did with Sydney in the Debt-Free Pharmacy Student, but I kind of added some things because the new Pharmcast is out, and there are a number of schools that are making it in-state tuition for out-of-state students. So I feel like UIC had converted already a couple years ago. MUSC also does this, and now Idaho State is coming in. So what's going to happen is that a lot of people that might have thought of private schools in those areas might be more attracted to the public school that's going to say, hey, you know what? Come on over to our state. We'll be happy to have you. Scholarships. So again, with scholarships, it really is very school dependent. But for example, when you talk about, I think it was Belmont that had a $25,000 a year scholarship, which is significant. If your tuition's $45, you get $25 off. You're down to $20, and $20 is really on the lower end of in-state, the really lower end of in-state. And getting to 25 is good. Getting to 30 is about average. But make sure that if you're looking at scholarships, it's reasonable where it gets you. But then also watch out for that kind of balloon at the end. Some schools do exact same tuition for all 4 years. Some schools do same plus the 15,000 or 20,000 in the last year, and that's to kind of cover that summer. But make sure you know what you're kind of landing on with those. But there are kind of three different scholarships. The national company scholarships tend to be small, $5,000, something like that. College scholarships, especially on admission, can be pretty high. They can go from a low of maybe $5,000 up to $25,000. And then sometimes there's named donor scholarships, and these you usually have to apply for. But if you're struggling with money or something like that, I even remember going to my dean saying, hey, things are a little tight this semester. And they, I think, gave me a $500 or $1,000, which was important at the time. Cost of living, so just kind of going over the big city versus mid-sized city versus small town. And then, which is better, 3-year, 4-year online program. And then really getting that extra value from a dual degree. So I go beyond just, okay, here are the rankings, into here's not only the ranking, but how to get the best return on your investment. Because if you can get a low cost school and a decent match rate, and you still match to this place that you want to be, then all is well. Good job for you. But you can very easily overpay. That is, pay for a school that has a very low match rate. And obviously that's not what we want. So anyway, but I'm excited about it. This is Pharmacy School Rankings for Residency. And in future episodes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how to judge a site by the rankings of their residents. And hear me out on this. What I'm just saying is, if you've got, maybe 4 residents there, and they've come from schools with a very high match rate, it's reasonable to kind of say, all right, well, let me look at where my school is. And if my school is geographically reasonable, that is, they take people from my school in the majority. And then I look at theirs, and I gave the example with Auburn, because the problem is Auburn is so high. I think it was number 25 in the country. So if you're above that 25, all is well. And then even if you're a little below, maybe, up to the 30, 35. But one of the kind of surprises that came out of writing this book was that 50% of the residents come from 36 schools. So that isn't 36% of the schools. That is 36 schools. So that number is not necessarily kind of shocking, because you're saying, okay, so 1/4 of the schools send 50% of the residents. Okay, what's shocking is that the other half of the residency spots are left for the other 112 schools, or 75%. So I'll say it again. Just 36 schools get half of all of the residency spots. and then the other 112 schools get the other half of the spots. So you can see that it's a huge skewed issue. And then I put those in there in a in a list about the size of the schools when I kind of mentioned, Florida being the top biggest school and biggest contributor. Then you kind of go in with like UNC, UCSF, Southern Cal was in there, Iowa was in there, so a bunch of different ones that are in there that are part of that half. So anyway, the whole point of the book is that you can not only look at yourself as your chances for residency, but then you can start looking at each individual site and say, all right, am I going to be a good match for this place? And then you say, everything I'm doing matches, but now let's look at the power of the school to get a match. And how hard is this residency? And maybe they say, yeah, we had 200 applications or 300 applications. Well, an easy way for them to remove a lot of those applications is to look at your school's ranking. And, if you come from a high-ranking school, a high-matching school, then, yeah, you have a reasonable shot. But if you don't, then just know where that fits. That's more of a reach residency. Certainly not a safety residency, than one that maybe you're on the level with. But here's the cool thing. You may not have realized that your school also opens doors for you at places where students have traditionally already gone. So I also mentioned in the Auburn episode that you really should be looking, if you are an Auburn student, at where the Auburn students went last year. And Samford students would probably want to look there too. Because what happens is they tend to take people from in the state in Alabama because they're familiar with them. And there's a law, psychology law or something like that. The more you're around somebody, the more familiar they are, the more attracted you are to them. And I know this isn't dating. It is a match. But in some ways, there's some truth to that, where the more they've kind of gotten to know you, the more comfortable they are with you, the more they've gotten to know students from your college that have been successful, the more they like you as well. And then also, it's also nice that, go into an interview, War Eagle, whatever it is they do at Auburn, and just that you have that connection. So is it unfair? No, I don't think it is unfair. I think it's reasonable that if you're going to hire someone and you want to get the best hire, you're going to want to hire somebody that you probably know the most about. So just recognize where you're at. But again, knowing the rankings really helps you with that. So really excited. I'll have the audiobook out hopefully in something like 45 days, and I'll be able to kind of give you guys some of those. But I think that this can be a real deal changer for many of you who are a bit nervous about the residency process, to see that, okay, my school ranks very high in interviews. It did okay in the match, but in persistence, really, I made a good choice. I got a good deal for the amount I'm paying in tuition. And then others of you may find the converse is true. But what the book will tell you and help you is know that, okay, well, students did really well in applying, so their letters of recommendation were good, their LOI was good, their CVs were good, but something happened in the interview that didn't work out as well as they would have liked. So let me, now that I know this right now, I can talk to my preceptors. Hey, I know my school hasn't had the best match rate, and this is very tough to say, but is there a way that maybe we could work on some interview questions and things like that while we're doing this? And just as I interview the students that I have here on the Pharmacy Residency podcast, and they're heard by thousands of people, that's one way to kind of figure out, okay, what am I doing with the interview? Where are my weaknesses and strengths? And I know people don't like to hear themselves, but you can gain so much when you know what your filler words are if you use them. But some people use like a tremendous amount of times. So is something that I use way too much. I'll just kind of kind of going into the next thing because I didn't quite think it through. And it's all about getting better. It really is. So there it is. I'm excited to present pharmacy school rankings for residency, solving the applications puzzle for future pharmacists. I'm going to have the next couple episodes talking about what not to put on the letter of intent and what to put in the letter of intent. But just to let you know that the new template is out, and you get that if you join the list at pharmacyresidencypodcast.com. It should send the new LOI template to you right away.